Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Thinking Out Loud podcast. Here today with Alex Wagner, and I'll let him introduce himself pretty quickly. But just in general, Alex most recently worked with the Air Force. He was the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Biden, and previously he worked in the Pentagon for Obama. So someone who's like has a lot of experience in the Pentagon, in the defense or the War Department, whatever you want to call it. And specifically, he focuses on the people side of it. He took care of a lot of the recruiting, a lot of the hiring policies back in his role. So Alex, if you want to introduce yourself better than I did.
Yeah, we'll do, Eduardo. So I've
Yeah.
built a career at the intersection of policy, law, national security, and technology. My most recent role is in the Department of the Air Force, which is actually a two-service military department. It covers the Air Force, but it also covers the U.S. Space Force. And what I was asked to do is take on a job that involves anything that touches people. So the entire recruiting enterprise for enlisted folks, the entire officer accession enterprise includes the U.S. Air Force Academy, 140 plus ROTC detachments, as well as all the officer direct commissioning and other ways of coming into the force as an officer for lawyers, doctors, nurses, and most recently, cyber professionals who want to become
Cool.
military officers. But
So
then it's also everything else that touches people and their families, including discipline, healthcare, all these very controversial issues. They used to joke that I had the most political job of any of the various assistant secretaries in the Air Force.
interesting. So you were behind the B-2s flying over football stadiums and having people excited about the Army. That was about the Air Force.
So you'd laugh, but much of that is not centralized in the Pentagon or even in our public affairs shop. Although the public affairs shop does a number of those flyovers, but often individual teams can request from the Air National Guard, and so those missions are often flown by Air National Guardsmen, and that are done at a local level. One of the concerns was that those are very expensive for very little output. And so
Yeah.
who is making the decision to authorize those, and do they have the big picture to understand whether or not that's worth doing or not worth doing
Yeah.
for our recruiting and for our visibility purposes?
Yeah, perfect. So, something I wanted to tackle head on, which has been, all around the Pete Hegseth Department of War and Trump's take on the Department of War, back then Department of Defense when you were there, which is what they call restoring the warrior ethos. They keep hammering that phrase. And essentially, in this speech that Hegseth gave a few weeks ago to all the generals, all the big star generals in the Defense Department, he was like, "We don't want any more DEI hires. We don't want fat soldiers." That was the word he used. So it was just,
Beardos.
exactly, yeah.
Did you know that wearing a beard is generally not allowed in the military?
Yeah, I did know. You gotta keep a clean shave.
Yeah, there's a couple exceptions. One is for medical reasons. About 60% of African Americans, because of the thickness of their hair, develop something called pseudofolliculitis barbae.
Interesting.
And so it becomes incredibly painful to shave.
Yeah.
And so one of the initiatives that Pete Hegseth has put out is if you can't figure out a way to cure that within a year, you're out.
Really interesting.
The other exception
Religious.
is religious. And when I was in the Department of the Army, Sikh Americans were seeking not an opportunity to maintain their religion and also fight for their nation, but they were really concerned about whether or not that accommodation could be made permanent. And so this is one of the last things we did in the Army is allow for permanent religious accommodations. So every time you got a new job or switched bases, you wouldn't need to reapply.
You wouldn't need to reapply. Okay.
That also is now being questioned. And you would not be surprised to know that the main legal organization that was supporting the Sikhs was the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a Arizona-based religious, usually conservative religious advocacy group.
Interesting. So, behind the defending the warrior ethos, there's more that goes into it. Just then, we have lazy soldiers, we have lazy people, and
I don't think I don't think there are many people who join the military who are looking for an easy route.
yeah, obviously,
I think there's
yeah.
lots of jobs
That's
in
that's
society.
what that's what they seem to be talking about when they make these speeches. That's what
every administration is going to have a different focus and different priorities. And I think it is a legitimate focus for this administration to say we need to focus on defending the homeland rather than deterring China from invading Taiwan. NATO needs to have more of a role in its own defense than it historically has done or been in the past.
Yeah.
I think that's completely fair game. What I don't think is fair game is to say that all of the things we did in the Biden administration to get recruiting back on track after COVID, all of the policies that we put in place to allow Americans to see themselves, the 99% of Americans that don't serve, to better see themselves in the 1% that do serve, so they understand what the military is. I mean, one of the reasons I'm here at University of Chicago is because as a civilian who never had much experience in the military, didn't really know many folks in the military growing up, I learned from being a civilian in DoD all of these incredible things that the military does, the standards the military maintains, the benefits to a military quality of life, not only for yourself, but also for your family. And I want to spread the word on that because right now, the only way that the 99% that don't serve know anything about the military is through movies like Top Gun.
Yeah.
Or commercials during football games, which talks about how military service results in damaged, broken, suicidal folks.
So how we? It's interesting that you touch a little bit on recruiting numbers, right? So for 2025, the current government just surpassed the quota that they had for a number of people enlisted, and this was like a few months ago, I believe, or
Yeah, so
we're
so
not
it's
in the
done
end
on
of
the
the year.
it's done on the fiscal year,
Uh-huh.
and so the fiscal year of 2025 ended
In
October 1st.
yeah.
So through 30 September would
Yeah.
have been the FY25 fiscal year for recruiting.
And we had some periods of not so good numbers after COVID. 2022 specifically wasn't. We had some downfalls. In 2024 fiscal year, we got things back on track. A big criticism that Trump and certain parts of the government have been saying is that you need to get the recruitment numbers up, and for that you can't be playing it safe. You can't be saying, hey, the military is a place for everyone. You got to be recruiting people that have this warrior ethos and really want to be in the military, and they have like blood in their eyes, and they don't want any DEI people. They don't want any people that are going there for diversity. And honestly, this is my personal opinion. You're defending your country. You should be the most qualified person to defend your country. You shouldn't be ticking a box. That's how I understand it. How do you conciliate both these views? Because you said you don't want people to feel they're excluded from the Army or from the Air Force or whatever it is, but we also have to have this ethos in a way. How do you conciliate both of these?
So before we get into what my argument is, and feel free to interrupt at any point, I'll just give you some data, some stats. So 2023, fiscal year 23, which involved like the fall of 22 and all of 23, was the first year that the Air Force didn't hit its enlisted recruiting goals since 1999.
Okay.
I know it might have been a while for you, but I remember 1999. I had just graduated college that year, and every company in the world was hiring. This was the beginning of the tech boom.
That's right.
And so what I learned was when the economy is really strong, private sector wage growth is high, unemployment is low, military service is a less attractive option. So what was happening post-COVID? Well, first of all, COVID 2020, 2021 meant that recruiters couldn't get into high schools, couldn't interact with young Americans to consider military service in malls or parking lots or all the traditional, in my view, somewhat dated places that recruiters try to engage young people who would consider service. Remember, the only recruiting challenge that we had was an enlisted one. Every single service has way too many officers for the slots they have for officers every year. So when we're talking about recruiting, we're talking about enlisted only. So challenge accessing from COVID. All of a sudden we came out of COVID. The economy, based on unemployment and private sector wage growth, was very strong. And so COVID plus a strong economy made military service a less attractive option. And then third, and this is the biggest concern of mine because it's an ongoing and growing challenge, is the lack of familiarity. I mean, if you don't come from a military family, if you don't grow up near a military installation, you're unlikely to know anyone in the military or know what a career in the military would be like. When I was in high school, 40% of Americans had a parent that served. And the reason is because during the Vietnam War, we had a draft.
That's right. Yeah.
And we haven't had a draft for 52
Thankfully.
years, thankfully.
Yeah.
And you know why we haven't had a draft? Because we haven't needed to pull that the requisite number of Americans involuntarily out of the population to serve in the military.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that we've been avoiding a draft is because women now can do any job that they can meet the standards for in the military. So we had a crisis post-COVID. And what did we do? We looked inwards and said, well, what are our standards? How do we keep our standards high so military service attracts the kind of person that wants to make themselves better, but also makes the military better? And we saw that many of our standards were out of date for what the times were. In the Air Force, we had a body fat percentage standard that was the body fat had to be in the Air Force much lower than you had in the Army or in the Navy. That didn't make any sense. Why wouldn't we have the same
But there's
standard?
still standards for body fat. I mean, you can't be.
It was a standard, but our
Way different.
standard was different. And so we adapted that standard. We moved that standard to what the Army and the Navy had for a body fat percentage. And guess what? We assessed over the course of fiscal year 24 about 6,500 young Americans who had otherwise been told you can't come into the service under that changed standard. I call it an optimized standard. And then we monitored them at basic training. Only one human being out of those 6,500 didn't pass the physical fitness test and enlist in the Air Force, ultimately come into the Air Force or Space Force. Just one. That means that with a 4% washout rate, many people who came in and met the old standard had washed out. So we had the standard that didn't make sense anymore. Tattoos. For some reason, the Air Force had a policy that you couldn't have a small tattoo on the back of your neck or on your hand. The other services allowed this.
These are really, small, like
But they
specific
allow-
things, but they
Huge numbers came in who would have otherwise been told you're not eligible to serve. And so one of the things
it was a
that I was
structural
really
change that you
focused
did.
on is expanding the opportunity for people to compete. It wasn't giving them
a free pass.
a free pass in. It wasn't saying you are qualified, now go. It was you have an opportunity to compete if you can pass our rigorous basic training course. And those that passed would come in. We're not lowering any bar. We're maintaining the high standard because that's critical both to be a member of a strong team, but it's also really important to say military service is not something that everyone's entitled to. You have no right in America to serve in the military, but you should have an opportunity if you can meet the standards to serve. And so, by the way, I know the administration is very excited to talk about how fiscal year 25 worked out. I can tell you in fiscal year 24, all the services also met their enlisted recruiting goals, including the Air Force that met it 3 years early. And I wrote an op-ed in November of 24 that talked about exactly the same things and how we did it with the head of the Air Force Recruiting Service. So we turned this around during the Biden administration. And fortunately, they haven't disrupted it enough in the first 9 months of 2025 to have a downturn. But it's
right.
really cyclical.
Yeah. But
And the economy matters. The strength of the economy matters, and familiarization with the military matters.
I mean, I think familiarization is really important, and I also think that, in the 90s, I don't think people were lining up to fight because the war had ended, right? The Cold War had ended. Where you're going to fight? People were still trying to figure that out. And obviously, you had the wars in Yugoslavia, and you had Black Hawk Down operation, but there was
those
no
were
major
niche.
conflict. Exactly. So you had this problem too, but this is what I've been seeing and talking to people, my age of Chicago. Obviously, a very limited sample here in Chicago, but I get the feeling that people are losing patriotism, and this was not partisan specifically. It's not Trump or it's not Biden or Kamala or whatever Democrat you want to put that in. I don't think there's a single stage in modern geopolitics that would get people interested to sign up and go fight for Israel and in Iran, or fight for uh, going back to Afghanistan again if that was something that's in our interest, or even to be sent to Ukraine. And Trump was elected in some capacity as this person who said, "I'm not going to get us involved in more wars," and he was elected saying that. So, how do you see this change in American foreign policy to a more dovish foreign policy, and the excitement for people to join up, and recruiting numbers coming in for the army?
So I'll challenge your assumption,
Okay.
which is that people want to join the military when they see the military in action.
It's not really when they see it in action, but you go to 9/11 and what happened
Well,
after
right.
9/11, which was everyone wanted to hug each other and come
To
together
literally
as a
hug the
country,
flag, yeah,
to hug the flag and
for a
come as
very
a
brief
country.
time.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's such, we fucked up the Middle East for over a decade. And there's this huge distrust of American foreign policy coming from both sides. You have Republicans talking bad about Biden and his effort in Afghanistan and Ukraine and in Gaza, and then you have Democrats criticizing Trump's peace plan and in Gaza, and Trump's bombing of Iran, which I think is something he broke a promise of campaign right there, and obviously the bombing of the ships in coming from Venezuela. So, given this dissatisfaction from both sides, do you see people hugging the flag still? Because that's a major concern.
I fully agree with you
Yeah.
that the tribalism that has resulted from social media, from the consolidation of the TV media environment to newspaper and print media consolidation, has resulted in people who are more focused on what they're focused on rather than what the nation should be focused on. So I'm concerned that people have less patriotism. But remember, people don't go into the military solely because of patriotism. People go into the military because it provides an unbelievable education. It provides economic mobility. It provides a sense of team. If you live in a small place, in a small part of, in a rural part of America, and you want to be part of something bigger than yourself, if you're questioning who you are, or you don't know if you're on the right path, the military can be an amazing team to be a part of. Each service is a little different. And so when you're talking about fighting and winning America's wars, I think that is the exact part of the military that is the most important part. It has to be ready to go tonight to fight and win America's wars. But when it's most effective is when it's so tough and so lethal that no one challenges us. And that's the part of the military that I think people are attracted to. When you look at young people 18 to 24 and ask them if they'd consider going into the military, the number is around 13%. 13% of Americans would even consider military service. And when you ask them why, the number one reason is putting their life on hold. And the number two reason is that they'll be hurt or damaged or killed. Now, there are a few jobs in the military that we call combat roles. And those roles are directly engaged in combat operations and taught and educated and trained to be ready for that. But there are tons and tons and tons of other jobs in the military that are not combat. Engineers, lawyers, doctors, nurses, HR professionals, acquisition executives. There, as I like to say, you can do any job in America in the military. Chefs, right? There's an annual competition of military chefs.
Yeah.
But there are only certain jobs in America. There's certain jobs in America you can only do in the military. And so I think people think of the military because of pop culture as hacking their way through jungles in Southeast Asia or, in sandy deserts. But the vast majority of the military is not doing those things, even when we've been at war for the last 20 years.
So something else I wanted to point out is that in this speech that Trump gave to the senior military officers, he said he wanted them to focus on the enemy within. And of course, we're seeing here in Chicago the looming threat of the National Guard coming over, and you had that in D.C., and you're having that in going to Memphis, and vast list of cities on the National Guard's list to clean up, get rid of crime.
Or on the president's list.
That's right.
I would not say it's anywhere on the National Guard's lists of priorities or things.
So you don't think that's, you think there's some debate between the president and the leaders of the National Guard.
Well, let's step back. I'm not sure how familiar your listeners are with the National Guard or the purpose. So when I said before that my job involved all the people things, it did. But it also involved oversight of the reserve components of the Air Force. And the Air Force has two reserve components. One is the Air Force Reserve. The other is the Air National Guard. There are 54 National Guards because there are 54 commanders-in-chief. There are 4 territories, 50 states and 4 territories, plus including the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
And each state's governor is the commander-in-chief of their National Guard. Usually it's an Air National Guard and an Army National Guard, which comprises the National Guard. And who is in the National Guard and what is it? Well, it's basically a part-time force. If you look back to the country's founding, these were militias and individual state militias. And the purpose of creating a National Guard was to make sure that they all had the same level of training and expertise if the nation needed to go to war, and the small standing army, which was one of the things the founders were very concerned about, which was having a standing army in the first place, could be augmented through having this reserve component force that exists in all the states.
Yeah.
Most people in the National Guard spend 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year in military uniforms. Now, there are some people that do it full time. There are a whole bunch of different categories and statuses, but the people in the National Guard live in the States. They're teachers or firefighters who are firefighters in the National Guard. I met firefighters when I went to Antarctica, and they were from Pittsburgh and Oregon and Iowa, and that was their day job. And then they spent a few weeks a year at the bottom of the world, fires in Antarctica. It's the coldest and windiest continent. There are cops in the National Guard. A lot of folks in the National Guard went in for the education benefits. And so they're college students like you or grad students. And so mobilizing the National Guard is something that often is done when the state governor says, hey, I don't have enough police. I don't have enough government officials because of some kind of unexpected situation. Think a flood or a fire.
But does it have to be an unexpected situation? Because crime in Chicago is terrible. Crime in Memphis is terrible. Crime in DC was terrible. And
objectively or relatively?
Well, I don't think people feel safe walking down the streets alone at night.
Where?
In Chicago.
Where?
Here on campus.
Really?
Yeah. This is like a personal anecdote, but I was walking by the lake. I went for a run yesterday at 10 p.m. and I called my friend to tell me to join him, and he goes, dude, you're crazy, because last month I was doing the same thing around 9 p.m. by the lake, and I got mugged. This is in Chicago. This is a mile from where we're sitting.
I believe it.
And it's pretty common. We've had students here in Chicago being shot, being killed while being students. We've had students, this is pretty common, getting mugged, walking back from parties, but also going from class to class at 12 p.m. in the afternoon.
Right.
It's not at all.
So here's my question for you.
Yeah.
Do you Chicago has one of, if not the largest private police forces in the country.
Right. Yeah.
It's augmented by the city of Chicago's police department.
Yeah.
What would people who have not been trained in firearms, arguably for some time, who are not trained in law enforcement, who have full-time jobs, who are very expensive, because not only are you paying for their salary when you mobilize the Guard, but
they stop doing their jobs.
Well, they stop doing their job. You pull them out of the private sector and whatever they're supposed to be doing to feed their family. You then pay for their housing on top. You then pay for all their medical care. You pay in a different status when they're in an active status into their retirement. And yet these people have absolutely... there are some people in the Army, they're called military police. In the Air Force, they're called security forces, who might have some law enforcement experience because
Yeah,
that's
yeah, I
what
get
they're
it.
trained to
They're
do.
not trained
But
to
they,
tackle.
so what,
Yeah.
so isn't, wouldn't a more effective solution to a crime problem in any major city be working with the city government
Yeah,
to put more
absolutely.
cops
Yeah.
on the street to resource
But that's not what
the,
we've been seeing in Chicago specific. I mean, the security problem in Chicago has been around for years, and like
well,
it's been terrible for years.
so I'll
And
talk
I
about
get what you're
data. Yeah,
saying.
well, let's talk about data, right?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: I'm not an expert in criminology.
Yeah, yeah.
I know what the military can and can't do. But at least from what I see on TV, is if you look at crime statistics for violent crime since the height during COVID, it's fallen dramatically every single year. So you could say that there was a crime crisis during the COVID pandemic. I think that one murder or one mugging is one too many. But you're asking me, why not pull this tool off the shelf that the local government doesn't want, that doesn't have the right training, and is incredibly expensive, instead of expanding the tools and resources that already exist in the city, trained and focused on dealing with that exact situation. It seems like, why not have the firefighters do the same thing? At least they have relationships
No,
with
I
the
get it,
local
but
community,
I mean,
or get healthcare workers
Yeah.
and have them wear healthcare uniforms and stand on street corners, or hire more private police departments. I mean, if your focus is stemming crime, then focus with a solution that understands something about crime. The military doesn't have experience in this world. And so it
Does
seems
it?
to
Does
me,
it have to?
well,
'Cause,
well, what
I mean,
you're saying then is that
'cause-
they're
'cause what
looking
I'm saying-
for a visual deterrent without having any
I mean,
actual
obviously,
deterrent.
obviously, if they're good in crime fighting, that's amazing. But even if they're not a trained police officer, which of course they're not, if it still works, it still works.
But
And
why would you say it works? Because
'cause
what
in
I'll
DC
tell
it
you is,
did.
well, no,
We tried in DC, and there was like 20-ish days in DC where you didn't have a single killing.
I don't think that's right.
So
And
the
I'd say
statistics
you've
were
got a
lying.
computer, you can
Yeah.
look that up. In fact,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's not right.
Okay.
And if it's true, it wasn't a result of the National Guard, because the Guard wasn't in the areas of DC where I live that
Exactly,
are high
yeah.
crime areas. They
But
were
it's-
sitting on the National Mall, or picking up trash in DuPont Circle, or walking outside Le Diplomat, which is this fancy French restaurant in the neighborhood that I live.
But
They
it's-
weren't in Southeast. They weren't in Northeast.
But it serves as a deterrent.
To whom? If
To
they're
the
not in the
criminals.
areas where there's crime, how would it serve as a deterrent?
Well, crime did drop. So you're saying that the statistics aren't false, or
No,
what's
listen,
the?
I don't think it's I'll say it, Eduardo. I'm not sure it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
helpful
no,
discussion for me to pretend to be an expert on crime statistics. But everything that I had seen was for the last year and since COVID, violent crime in every major city in America had been dropping pretty dramatically from 24 to 25, month over month. So if you compare months, the drop has been pretty dramatic. Am I saying that having some National Guardsmen out there had nothing to do with that continued drop, or maybe even augmented that drop? No, I'm not going to argue that.
Yeah.
What I'd say is, it's not a long-term solution,
I'm
and
not
it's
saying
not
that
it's
either,
not
yeah.
a very effective solution either, because these people who are trained in the military are trained that if someone is confronting them, right, and they feel threatened, they're authorized to use lethal force to defend themselves. And actually, in a conflict scenario, their training is that in some cases you can use lethal force not based on your perceived threat, but solely based on someone's status. And that lethal force is not murder, right? That is the objective of war. The objective of war is to remove the enemy from the battlefield. And there's two principal ways you can do that. One,
No, I'm
through
not
lethal
saying
force,
Yeah.
or two, detention.
Yeah.
That's what their training is.
Yeah.
So is it cheap? No. Is it effective? Maybe temporarily as a messaging thing, but it's not a long-term solution. And I think if crime is your focus, the long-term solution, because the short-term solution isn't going to work. The only reason it was able to happen in DC is because there is no state National Guard in DC. There is a DC Guard, but it's always federalized because its chain of command goes from the president to the Secretary of Defense, and actually defers that authorization to the Secretary of the Army, kind of acts as the governor of Mayor DC for the use of the Guard. So
Yeah.
that person also not trained in crime fighting. Here's the other half. If those guardsmen in DC are picking up trash and working on beautification projects, and there's some type of challenge, if there's a fire, if there's flood, sometimes guardsmen are loaned to other states to help with national or state or local disasters. They're not going to be able. Think about those guardsmen who are sent up from Florida or Louisiana to DC
right.
during hurricane season. What happens during hurricane season?
I mean, I'm more libertarian than I am conservative, and I don't think it's a good idea to federalize everything and use everything. You know, you don't want to use a bazooka to kill a mosquito, or I'm not saying murders or mosquitoes, definitely not. But what I'm saying is, like, I would prefer to live in a world where the president didn't have to personally sign off in his checklist to wipe out crime in Memphis, wipe out crime in DC, wipe out crime, whatever. I don't think that's
That
good
even
for our
the
country.
president's job?
Exactly. I don't know.
I mean, is that the president's job to deal with local issues, which can be very different?
But my pushback is that I just pulled it up. Like, this weekend, we had 21 shootings in Chicago and 3 murders.
Yep.
Not to mention robberies, not to mention carjackings. It's not a good statistics. We're supposed to be the developed city in a developed country, and that doesn't even count. That's Chicago City, not Chicago Metro.
Yep.
That would be skyrocketing number. So my question is, like, my pushback would be, clearly the local government hasn't been able to figure this out, and I get it. It's the Guard is not trained to do that, but in DC, you had I pulled that up too. You had 19 days without any murder. You had auto thefts down 40%. You had burglaries down 50%.
From what? From when?
From the month before.
So it's kind of like a stock chart, because you're throwing out numbers. But what I'll say is, if you look at a stock over a single day, if you look at a day, you're going to see really big spikes. And you can say, oh my God, the stock, the price varied wildly. And you pull it out to a week, and the spikes will be there, but it'll be less noticeable. And then you pull it out to a year, and the line seems a lot smoother. What I'd say is, instead of focusing on a single month, look at the trend. Is crime going up, or is crime going down? And what are the interventions that are being used? Is 3 murders over a weekend incredibly high, or is it 50% or 100% less than it was during the same month last year, or the same weekend last year? What are the trend lines? Because that'll tell you what city officials are doing right, or where they should be doing better. But I don't think crime typically is a federal issue, because very often, unless there are
different issues in different cities.
It's actually one of the things that is under the 10th Amendment exclusively left to the states, unless there is a federal issue involved. And so this is something that every state is going to have different challenges. Every city is going to have different challenges. And for those 3 people's families who were killed, it's horrific. And I don't mean to minimize that.
Yeah, of course.
But I also don't think that this particular intervention is aligned towards solving the problem in the long term, that I think we both agree needs a better solution than either party has been able to come up with for quite some time.
Yeah,
although it does seem like the trend lines are going down.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, the thinker in general is like, the thinker and myself, we're pretty libertarian, pretty conservative, and trying to respect our Constitution the best we can. And again, I don't think deploying the military for every minor issue or every local issue should be the goal of our military. But it is a question to be asked, because this we've been having the problem of crime, and it has been going down for the past few years, but it's still, students don't feel safe on campus. And as you said, as you really well pointed out, Chicago has one of the biggest private security forces in America, the University of Chicago, and still we don't feel safe.
Right.
So it still begs the question, you know, how can we, should we use the military to nudge local governments to change? Because they're changing, but not fast enough to protect the American people. And
Well, that's
this
pretty.
is
Wait, well, I'll stop you there. That's pretty crazy.
what?
Should we use the military to force states and localities to do things differently? I mean, I am not, as I said, I'll say it for a third time.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not an
Yeah.
expert in criminology,
No, me
in
neither,
local
but yeah.
issues, but I do know a thing or two about the military. And what I'll tell you happens is when the guard gets deployed here in America, it's undermining its readiness. It's undermining its training for the roles and missions that those people, those men and women who raised their hand and signed up and said, I want to be an engineer, I want to be an admin officer, I
Mm-hmm.
want to be a helicopter pilot. It undermines the readiness and preparation and the lethality that they can project, in the Army's case, to augment the active duty Army. In the Air Force's case, there are certain specialties, specific specialties in the Air Force that don't exist in the active force, that only exist in the Guard or in the Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And if those reservists are deployed to be posters of and deterrents in cities without the right training, there's a whole other part of their mission that you're basically saying is less important. One. And two,
Mm-hmm.
what does it say to people in those communities who are interested in recruiting to say, hey, sign up for the Guard so you can police your own community with weapons of war and with no training? Or worse, pick up trash or do beautification efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to want to do that. That's not why you join the military.
Mm-hmm.
You want to serve your country. You don't want to be in a law enforcement capacity
Yeah.
because you don't have the training. And so it hurts recruiting, it hurts readiness. I can't speak to its real effect on crime up or down because I'm not an expert in that. But
Yeah.
I can tell you it's not why people join the Guard,
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Of
And
course.
second, it hurts the overall readiness of the component, whether it be the Guard itself, whether it be the total force,
Mm-hmm.
and it undermines the ability to deter the way the military needs to be ready for the nation.
Mm-hmm. So you touched a bit on Army readiness and lethality and how good the people in our Army are.
Yep. And the Air Force and the
And
Space
yeah, yeah,
Force
of course.
and the Marine
Yeah.
Corps and the Navy.
Yeah. How people in our defense
Yeah.
uh, our defense sector are how much capable they are. How do you see that going forward? Because you know you have other countries that are, China specifically, much bigger population. They're building things faster than we are. They're building things in bigger scale than we are, and they can just recruit everyone. Like if they recruit the same amount of people,
Right.
proportionally, they're gonna have such a bigger segment of people. And of course, it's really important that we have very well trained troops and really motivated troops. So, if it's not the number, and I don't think it is the number, what makes the U.S. military, its people in the military, so good?
So two things.
You know.
First and foremost is that we have 80% of the military is enlisted. So, if you want to draw up like on a back of a napkin, you've got two classes of folks in the military. You have officers, which usually have leadership roles,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have enlisted folks who are technical experts in specific things. As you get higher in the officer pipeline, your responsibility expands. Last week we had General C.Q. Brown, who was the
Mm-hmm.
highest ranked military officer in the country, here at the IOP and on campus. And in one of his talks, he said, the more senior you get, the more long term your focus and your strategy needs to be because of the impact that you can have on the longer term things. The more junior you are, the more focused you are on the here and now. So you've got 80% roughly of the military across all services are enlisted, 20% are officers. The enlisted corps being trained, being ready, being experts is actually what distinguishes the United States from almost every other country on earth. And the amount of investment in their education that we provide and their specialization and their quality of life and their family's life and the benefits that their families get. I mean, you want to talk about socialized medicine. Everyone in the military has free healthcare, socialized medicine. Does it work as well as maybe some other countries do? Maybe not, but it works pretty darn well, and it's completely free. So I look first at the quality and competencies of our enlisted corps, which is far superior to any other country's military, and all of our allies model their military and their enlisted forces on ours. I look at China. I also look at Russia, two countries with much larger militaries, and I look at their enlisted corps who aren't trained who at the level that they need to be, who don't get the leadership opportunities, who aren't allowed to question or present new information or different circumstances the way our teams are intentionally structured. And I say every day that gives us an advantage over them. The other thing that we've got is we leverage the various viewpoints and cultural understandings and perspectives of a very diverse American population. And I think that's another advantage that we have. If you can create an environment where everyone is on the same team and trying to help themselves and their teammates succeed and feels comfortable expressing their point of view within limits, then you can bring in all these different perspectives to solve problems differently. And I'd argue your solutions end up being far better. And so I think the diversity of the United States military, it's more diverse in the enlisted corps than the rest of the country by population. And the amount of education and resources and training and specialization we have for our enlisted corps is a clear, significant advantage over our adversaries and over our competitors.
And how true do you think it's I probably know, I think I know the answer to this, but how true do you make of the comments that we were losing our warrior ethos? Do you think these aspects you were talking about, that we have such a qualified, such a well-trained military, such a ferocious young American ready to defend our country, and that's one of our biggest strengths. Do you think we were losing that? Do you think the losing of our warrior ethos is real? And if so, are we fixing it correctly?
I mean, I'll tell you, we spoke consistently during the Biden administration about how we have a warrior first culture, how people realize the responsibilities that comes with the ability to use lethal force, as well as how to expertly execute that mission tonight, if asked, and to be ready to do that tonight. I think that things, we live in a politicized environment, increasingly so, and I think it's mainly rhetoric when they say we had lost our warrior ethos. I worked every single day with people across who might have been Democrats, who might have been Republicans, might have been independents, might have not care, and they were all focused on the same thing. And I was focused on a single goal, which is how to make the military better, how to make people's jobs better, how to make people more effective in their jobs, how to reform things that didn't work, and how to amplify and resource things that were working and spread that knowledge so the entire institution could be better. And I believe it. I believe that that diverse teams are better at solving hard problems.
What does that mean?
It means
Diverse,
I watch shows all the time on TV, right? And you see like the doctor who thinks differently, who has, some kind of disability, or the doctor who lost her memory, is on this show, and they bring in all these other doctors and try to figure out what's the problem with the patient. Or law firms, right, where they have all these different lawyers sitting around a table on TV saying, how can we come up with the right solution, the best argument? And what I see is, I don't think you or anyone would want to go to the hospital where every single doctor there was trained by the same person. I know there's no company in America that would go to a law firm where every single lawyer went to the same law school, and studied under the same law professors. And so, why would we want a military that increasingly was able to bring in only people who had a parent that served, or a family member that served, or lived near a military installation? I just don't think. I don't think that's healthy to connect the American people to its military. I also don't think it's best for actually being effective. I want people who see things differently, right? And there's going to be conflict when people come from different backgrounds. Very often, gender can be something that you see things differently from. I did not realize that when military people PCS, permanent change of station, as a civilian, that you have to leave a lot of things at home. You're not allowed to bring liquids. So what does that mean when you move every 3 or 4 years? It means that if you have wine, you can't bring it. If you have a liquor, if you have bourbon, right, extensive bourbon collection, the military won't pay to ship that. So you have to find a way to ship it on your own. You know what else the military won't pay for? Let's say your wife is nursing, and because she can't nurse at at every point of the day, maybe she has a job. Very often she'll store breast milk, right? The military used to not pay to ship breast milk.
Should we be paying for everything like that?
Well, you pay for furniture, right? You pay for someone to not only ship it, but the military also pays for someone to come in and pack it up for you. Mirrors, many of your personal effects, all of your clothes. What does a nursing mother do if you're going to be driving? Because very often you have to drive because you want to keep your wine collection. You don't have to pay for it, and you can only ship one car. But if you have two cars, instead of paying for it, you'll do a road trip to a different place in the country, including, by the way, Alaska, with your second car, and you'll fill that up. And so if that takes a week, how does someone store breast milk for a nursing mother? So we didn't say, oh, you know what, we're going to give you an extra incentive, so we can incentivize, being a parent. Although that's actually what the military does. It incentivizes family creation, and it's family, having a family. So people have something to
look for when coming back.
Exactly.
Something to defend.
So what we said was, and I didn't realize how hard it was to be a nursing mother for a newborn, because I'm not a nursing mother. But when women in the Air Force came to me and said, this is a real issue and we're paying out of pocket because it's not covered, I said, well, let's figure out what a solution would be. And so now people who are nursing mothers have up to $1,000, not much, right? Not much, that they can, whether they're in the military or they're a military spouse, that they can use to go pack up with dried ice and in storage and send to wherever they are, so that then when they get there, they can have milk ready for their kids, their babies.
So,
but it would have never occurred to me that this very small thing.
It's a very specific problem.
It's extremely specific.
You need some diversity of perspective to realize that problem.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting. And we're running out of time here soon, but I needed to.
Okay, we could talk about anything.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you a couple of more broad questions.
Do you want quick answers from me?
No, don't worry.
We could do lightning round too.
You can. No, don't worry about it. We like to have long out thought discussions, so that's pretty good. Keep it up. But I was just thinking, we're talking about how the Trump administration and Hegseth are pretending or not really pretending, they're actually changing the way the military works and changing the way people in the military work. What's your biggest concern for the military in the future, and what's your biggest thing you say, hey, that they're actually doing a good job in, because what are you positive and what are you negative about?
I'll start with the positive. For too long, the military told its story either through antiquated press releases. In the Air Force, they often wrote stories that seemed like news stories, but they were actually just press releases disguised as news articles, and put those online and expected the American people to understand. This administration has been thinking about communication pretty consistently since the beginning, whether it's taping weekly videos from the secretary or other leaders like the press secretary about what's going on. And that message gets out to the troops, not only in the Washington, D.C. area, but all over the world. I think it's very effective. There's a armed forces network which has these very stilted ads about don't drive drunk and don't sexually assault people that seem like a vestige from a different era. So I'm hopeful that not only in style, but also that focus on communication can change some of the schools about how we teach enlisted folks to be public affairs officials, how they write stories, how they engage with Hollywood, how they tell their story to broader audiences rather than just flyovers.
Yeah.
Because when 99% of Americans don't serve, they only get their information on the 1% that do.
That's right.
From very specific sources. So I'm hoping they can scale that. My biggest fear about what's happening is that the military is becoming politicized. And by that, I mean you have to agree with the politics of the administration in order to succeed. I am a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my entire life. I've served as a political appointee under 2 Democratic presidents, but I can tell you I have no idea the politics of any military officer I worked with. And most of the time, I couldn't tell you the politics of any of the DoD civilians I worked with. And it is shocking to me that since I left, one of them became an appointee in the Trump administration. And some of them who I had no idea what their political affiliations were would send me notes, generals and senior officers, thanking me for saying in op-eds and quotes in different articles what they felt that they couldn't say. But all of this was a revelation after I left, because those officers swear an oath to the Constitution.
Not to a party.
Not to a party, not to a president. I mean, the commander-in-chief matters, but that's not who their oath is to.
That's right.
And they take that oath very seriously, and I know it because they talk about it all the time. And they talked about it to me. And again, I told you at the beginning, I felt like I had the political portfolio in the Department of the Air Force, the more politicized issues, whether it was access to reproductive health care, whether it was, creating, intentionally engendering a more diverse force. Again, not because only it's the right thing to do, not because we want, the population of America to see itself in the military, but because I think it gets us better outcomes. Different perspectives get us better outcomes and better problem solving. But when you start putting generals into key appointed positions because they agree with your politics, I think that's dangerous. When you start firing people because 4 years ago they participated in a Women's History Month event that the previous administration said was a priority, that's a problem. When you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs fired because he taped a video talking about his personal experience and why we have to do more for people that often feel like they are the only ones in situations, that they don't feel a part of the team, that we can build a bigger, better team by bringing in more people and more perspectives to create an environment where everyone can succeed, where we have a team of teams, right? That's the thing. We have a team of teams in the military. And I think it gives people a sense beyond their individual sense of who they are, that they're doing something more important as part of a group of people who are doing something really important to serve the nation. And so I think this focus on small ball issues like beards, like sideburns, like fat generals is a distraction, because the Secretary of Defense doesn't have the experience in any job really, but certainly in his last military job, to be comfortable on the strategy, that long-term issue that I mentioned that is required when you get more senior. I mean, the department does budgets. Right now, like today, DoD is focused on executing one budget, building a second budget for the next year, and then building a budget for the next 5 years out.
Yeah.
And so the higher you go, the more strategic you've got to be.
Yeah, the less in the weeds you are and more macro.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know any general that
Yeah.
ever gave much of a damn about beards or weight. That's what junior enlisted and certain senior enlisted folks' job is.
Yeah.
Not officers, and certainly not the top officers.
Yeah. Just one last
Yeah.
question, and uh, if you want to make it brief to make it look
Okay.
cool, go for it.
I'll try.
You don't need
Okay.
to, but you work under two different administrations in the military, and in this previous one, you had a really big role in recruiting and in dealing with the day-to-day people working in the military. It's kind of a two-parted question, but what would you want to say to these people if some of them are listening, and what would you want your legacy to be seen as?
I mean, I'd say to them, I think the same thing that I said to them from when I first started and then all the way to my last days in the Pentagon, which is I have learned so much from the officers, the enlisted folks, and the civilians I worked with. I learned a lot from those who were able to make big changes and do good things that I saw from afar. And I was privileged to be part of this team of teams for a short period of time. And the smarter I became, the more open to feedback I was, the better and more effective I was to help make their lives better, their families' lives better, and the institution over the long term better. What was your second question?
What do you want your legacy to be remembered?
I mean, I often
You're
say,
pretty young. You don't have to.
I'll take that as a compliment. I feel like I often joke that my last position was like the bottom rung of top management.
Okay.
So I'm not sure I had much of a legacy, but if I did one thing right, it was help the enlisted force understand that there was somebody who was thinking about them and fighting for them every single day. And in the Pentagon, it's not like most bases that have, a couple officers and a lot of enlisted folks. In the Pentagon, it's mostly officers and very few enlisted folks. And it's very easy to be caught up in the long-term strategic management leadership things that consume
And forget
officers. Forget about the quality of life and how is there an open childcare center, and how do you what time is the dining hall open, and are you going to get your meals there because the food is good, or are you going to have to go off base and eat something less healthy and more expensive, and how that impacts military pay. Can you afford to get a house in the community? All of those things, had I not been able to travel extensively and then travel with the Space Force and the Air Force's senior enlisted leaders and see the force through their eyes, it wouldn't have come to my desk organically.
Yeah.
And so it was just a privilege to be focused on their issues and to let them know I read the online boards complaining about everything from mold in the dorms in Japan to broken windshields in Alaska to how difficult it is to get your things moved and not be broken on time. And I don't know if I solved those, but I put a lot of effort into each of those issues to make their lives better, because when the little things in your life is better, you can be focused on your job. If you're not worried about your family, if you're not worried about whether or not your furniture is going to come on, show up on time, if you're not worried about whether or not your paycheck is going to be in the bank account when you expect it.
Well, that's pretty good.
All right.
I think it's a
Well,
pretty good response. But, well, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was pretty fun to talk, and it was good to learn way more from you, and I hope we had a good conversation.
Yeah.
For you, the viewer, we're going to be back soon with new episodes, so just stay tuned for that. But for now, thank you. Thank you, Alex, for coming.
Eduardo, it's a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
appreciate it. Thank you.